Aloha. This is the map where we went out from Maliko Gulch. On the right, you see Jaws. This is Maui's North Shore. Aloha. Fred Reeves coming to you from the agency in Maui. This is the craft, the Agency 1, on perhaps the most exciting sail of my life to this point on my Hobie Adventure Island. I just departed from Maliko Gulch on the North Shore, having completed 5 weeks of training in Maalaea Harbor, the windiest harbor in Maui. And the North Shore has the most waves that have come all the way from the Aleutian Islands. As I set my sail, I remembered to set it only a third reef, and I'm happy I did, as the winds were there immediately to carry me out to sea. Almost from the beginning of my departure from the bay, I immediately noticed the power of the waves on the North Shore is way more immense than in the bay. I guess it's because they've come from such a large distance to welcome me. I wasn't overzealous about getting more sail out there. As the further I go out, the more I notice that the waves continue to build, as does the excitement. One of the tests I was doing from Maliko Gulch just happens to be from the same spot that longboarders left the next day to go down to Kahului, and it's a downwind race, so I was curious, one, as to how heavy the currents are as I get out a mile offshore, and two, whether or not I could tack against the wind, which I was successful. 2 out of 3 tacks. You have to use the flippers on the boat, which is the pedaling exercise I get, when you come up on the wind, as a trimaran wants to stop dead in the water as you come to make your tack. And that, you'll see, is exactly what happened. I successfully pulled 2 tacks, and one I had to come about and go downwind. My concern was that because this was the first time I had ever departed from Maliko Gulch, I wasn't at all knowledgeable whether or not I'd be able to come back in the slot, or I'd be forced to go downwind on jibes and come up somewhere south along Hokipa. The problem there is that as you go along the North Shore, the beach, as it gets shallow because of the size waves, when the waves are up, there's not much of an area to come into. I might have to go all the way to Kanaha. As it turned out, the waves were manageable up to the point that I decided it was time to come back. I compare the scene on the North Shore compared to the winds of Maalaea Harbor, as Maalaea's like a lithe ballet artist doing jumps and dances and swirling and twirling, and the North Shore is more like a 500-pound gorilla dressed in a tutu and dancing flat-footed, ready to snap you. That's my first tack. I've come around and I can see that spotting Maliko Gulch will not be too difficult, because the cliffs run along the side on both sides of the gulch, and the gulch has a lot of greenery, so it allows me to spot it if I'm a mile or 2 out by visual observation without having to go to my navigation tools, which I have on my iPhone in a watertight box in my life vest for emergency purposes. On this particular day, as I found out later, they still had small craft warnings up, which probably explains the size of the waves that I encountered. According to my friends that do windsurfing off of Ho'okipa, that this is just basic chop off the North Shore. The location is about a mile south of the beach where Jaws and those famous wonderful 70-foot, 100-foot waves come in and people attempt to surf them by being pulled over them. I will not be doing any of that with this particular vessel. So I'm delighted that I got to experience for the first time waves that made the horizon totally disappear, and it just became one wave after another. And as we go downwind toward the conclusion, you can see that that's not a horizon that I'm going off from, but it's about 4 waves ahead of where I was. All in all, the boat performed quite well. The Hobie's been holding up small problems with shear pins in heavy waters, and I'm happy I didn't experience that on this run, since it wouldn't be something that I want to contend with in reality. When the shear pin goes, you have no rudder. I have another film that I did 2 days after this one, and that's exactly what happened. A rudder went out. The rudder went out, and I had to come in via a paddle with a rudder, and the Hobie paddles are too flexible to act as an efficient rudder, and so I didn't necessarily hit my mark. But this run on the North Shore was, besides exhilarating, trouble-free, and it says a lot for this boat that was designed in these waters. Its prototype ran from Kanaha up to Wailu, and this is just about midway between that distance, and it performs as if it's been designed for the waters. At this point, I'm trying to make another tack up, head on the wind, and you see the bow is still not answering to the rudder, and so I just decided to fade off to port and go to the downwind and come about. And this is where we had a couple of hundred downwinders the next day doing that run going down the Kahului. And because I'm making this video and talking on it, I did make it back to Maliko Gulch that you see there in the green in front of me. All in all, it was the most exciting sailing I've done on the ocean in the last 40 years. We'll have more of these coming to you from Maui.